So today we're going to make a peekaboo dress. Now the peekaboo dress comes in all manner of designs, but the principles of putting together the garment remain the same. The dress shape is designed to be worn for all seasons, so it can be worn on its own in the summer, and when it gets a little bit cooler you can team it with jeans or leggings or a long sleeve t-shirt for a bit more versatility. So the first thing to do is to get yourself familiar with the piece of cloth and the pattern pieces on it. So printed onto the fabric we have a dress front, we have two dress back sections. Now some kits also have printed linings, and this will be three smaller dress sections like these. And finally a button placket, and we'll come to what a button placket is a bit later on. If you haven't got a printed lining in your kit, then you'll have a separate piece of fabric. And what you do for this is you use the dress sections that we'll cut out in a little bit as templates. So on your kit you'll see that there are three sizes printed on it. Using the legend, select the age that you wish to make for and look at the line. And then you'll see the three different lines printed on, so you just select the size that you want to make and use that to cut the kit out. Getting a really nice sharp pair of scissors, and if you have material scissors, don't let anybody in the household use them for cutting paper, it will make them blunt. Start to cut out the size. I always suggest to cut out the hem for the oldest age on the kit. This means that you can turn up the hem and fold it down as the child grows and gives a bit more growing room. So I think rather than you sit and watch me cut everything out, in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one I prepared earlier. So if your kit comes with a separate piece of lining as opposed to a printed piece, use the dress pieces as templates. So lay the dress pieces onto the fabric and pin into position. And then with your sharp scissors, cut round . It doesn't matter if your cutting lines aren't perfectly neat, as all the lines will get evened up when you sew. So the first part of putting the dress together is to neaten all the long edges with a zigzag stitch. If you are lucky enough to have an overlocker, then you can use that, but a zigzag stitch will do just fine. And what this will do, it will stop the clothes from fraying through washing and wear and give a much more professional finish. And when I say long seams, I mean the side seams, the centre back seams. So pop your piece of fabric into the machine and zigzag stitch all the way down the cut edge. So don't worry about how neat your zigzag stitches are. As I say, these aren't for decorative effect, they're for just keeping the fabric from fraying. And also, if you snip off the ends of the threads as you go, you're less likely to get little dangly bits hanging out of the dress. Now, in sewing we often talk about right sides and wrong sides. Now for us, the right side is always this printed side of the fabric where the lines and the design are on. The next step is to put together the shoulder seams. So lay out the dress main section in front of you and lay on top, so right sides together, the two back sections. And we need to pin them so that these shoulder sections match up. And so do that for either side. Now we're not going to sew from one side to the other. We're going to start in 1 centimetre and end 1 centimetre before the edge. Now the reason that we're going to do this is because this shoulder seam is going to get cut down so that we don't have excess bulk on the dress once it's turned through to the right way. Now it might help you to mark this with pins or a bit of tailor's chalk, or you can just do it by eye if you feel confident that way. So starting your sewing from 1 centimetre in from the armhole edge, do a few back stitches first, and this will stop the threads from unravelling, and sew across to the other side, stopping 1 centimetre short of the neck opening. So once we've sewn the shoulder seams for the main body of the dress, we then need to do exactly the same thing for the shoulder seams of the lining. So again, fabric right sides together, pin them at the shoulders and stitch from 1 centimetre in from the armhole to 1 centimetre in on the neck hole. So once you've sewed all the shoulder seams together, now we've got to introduce the iron, and I can't stress the importance of using the iron a lot to press open your seams and to keep the dress nice and crisp. It will give a much more professional finish. So get out the iron and the board too. So now we move on to step 3, which is unravelling the mystery of the button placket. Now a button placket is where you sew buttons onto on the dress. If you can imagine a shirt, you have a layer where you have the buttonholes and a layer where you have the buttons sewn onto. And so this little bit sits proud underneath. So first we take the rectangle of fabric and right sides together, fold it in half lengthwise and pin that into position. We then are going to sew down either side, either of the short ends, at a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So line it up 15 mil from the end and stitch away. Snip off your ends, and now we're going to turn the little envelope to the right way, pressing out the corners to get a nice crisp corner, and then we're going to press it. So once you've ironed the placket, we're going to zigzag stitch along the 2 raw edges of your envelope to form a little parcel, and here's one I've already done. So now we're going to attach the dress sections to the lining. So lay the dress out in front of you, right side up, so that's with the printed pattern facing you. Take your stitch together lining sections and lay it so that the right sides are together onto the top. And here you need to start lining up the shoulder seams and pin it into place. Do that on either side. And try and get the pins all facing the same direction, so that when you sew it's easy to pull the pins out and you don't have to crook your arm round to remove them. And when pinning together at the shoulder seams, make sure that it lays flat on either side. So then pin around the neck hole, again being careful to keep the seams flat, and also pin down one side of the centre back seam. So once you've completed pinning it all together, we're going to start sewing, firstly by doing the armhole seams. So line them up. Again, start with a few back stitches at the beginning and sew round the armhole, removing the pins as you go. And it's important to try and keep these seams flat as you go over here. And then repeat with the other side. So now we're going to stitch around the neck hole. Feed the fabric as you go. So when you've got to the opposite side of the neck hole, with the needle down, lift the foot and turn it round so that you can now run down the centre back seam on one side.